Howdy, this is the Views from the Schott podcast. I'm your host, your one and only host, Tim Miller, and today it is Wednesday, January 21st, 2026, and I wish you a very, very, very happy International Play Day Day. On today's show, we are reviewing Ohio State basketball's victory over the Minnesota Golden Gophers that occurred last night. The Buckeyes winning and outlasting Minnesota in overtime, 82-74, the final score in that one, folks. Either you're built for this or you're not. We've got people in my mentions throughout this game talking about how Diebler needs to be let go and this player is bad and this team is bad. And again, I question, why are you watching? Because at some point, we just have to recognize there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs with this team. It's the case with any team in America. It's never going to be perfect. And yet in this game, there's a lot of frustration. Ohio State leads for most of the way. And what's most important is that they lead when the game is over. Tied at the end of regulation, Ohio State ends up winning this game. It was a tight one. It was a close one. And then it wasn't so close because Ohio State really pulled away there in the overtime period. So all that said, the rule will never change here. It's just never tweet. Never, ever say Ohio State's not going to win. Never, ever say anything negative about a player because there's one player who a lot of people are probably negative about in this one. And he ended up potentially being the most valuable player in the game for Ohio State and the most crucial possession of the game. We'll talk about him. We'll talk about this entire game. There's a couple things I want to bring your attention to first, okay? Subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, please like the video right now. That helps the show out more than you could ever understand, and I appreciate it more than you would ever know as well. So please like the video on YouTube. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast. That helps out a bunch. Make sure you're following on all the socials. Look, there's a lot of questions, and there's a lot of rumors, and there's a lot of things that are being said as fact that are not true about Puff Johnson. So I'm tired of it. And for that reason, I will post an article tomorrow on my Substack with all the details on Puff Johnson. I will dispel some rumors. I will talk about some claims that have been made that are not true. And I will tell you, when should you expect Puff Johnson to play for Ohio State? Now, I've already told all of my insider subscribers in the chat on Substack all the details on Puff Johnson. I normally don't do this. I'm going to give you a peek behind the curtain because there's so much information on Twitter that is absolutely not true, and I'm tired of it. So I'm going to talk about that. So make sure you're on the Substack. It's viewsfromtheshottpodcast.substack.com. Highly recommend you get there. Subscribe for completely free. That article will be free. It will not be paywalled. So make sure you're there. We got to recap this game for Ohio State. It's a big win for the Buckeyes. It's a quad 3 win. It's a home win. Yeah, it helps Ohio State's record. It helps their Big Ten conference record, but it's still a quad 3 win. So it's not the most impressive that Ohio State is going to have this season by any stretch, but it was one that as you came into this game, and as I said, I didn't think it was necessarily a must win because there's plenty of opportunities on the schedule for Ohio State moving forward in order for them to win meaningful basketball games and play its way into the NCAA tournament. But I did call this a can't lose because up until this point, Ohio State had 0 quad 3 and quad 4 losses. That's crucial for their NCAA tournament resume. You had to pick this one up, especially with it being at home. This was a game you just couldn't afford to lose at this point. And Ohio State, they check off the box here. They win. It's a quad 3 game. I said it in the preview show. Minnesota, they're not a bad team. I don't think Minnesota is bad whatsoever. Just in their last game on Saturday, they were tied with Illinois at halftime. I talked about the history over the past couple games for Minnesota and the theme. My thesis on Minnesota at this point was essentially this is a team that just came up short, but was always in it. Every single game, it felt like Minnesota was keeping games tight. And yet again, we saw that in this one where the game goes to overtime. From the very start of this game, Ohio State gets out to a 10-0 lead. They go on a 10-0 run to start the game. Minnesota doesn't make a field goal until the clock says 14 minutes on it in the first half. They shouldn't be allowed to even be in the game at that point. But Minnesota, they played gritty. They played tough. They got their way back into the game. A lot coming from three-pointers, but Minnesota was a tough team. They were going to be a tough team to beat. I think the line closed at 7.5. Ohio State being favored 7.5 or 8.5, depending on where you look. Good teams win, great teams cover. I get all that. But in regards to the outcome here, it was a game you couldn't lose. And Minnesota's a tough team to beat. So, regardless of what the spread was, you won the game. That was what was most important, obviously, for Ohio State, even with the 10-0 run in the first half to start the game. And then in the second half, you saw Ohio State get up to 11-point lead there early on in the second half. And then the game goes on, and Minnesota gets it tighter and tighter and tighter to the point where Ohio State unable to score with that John Mobley Jr. shot at the end of regulation. And then you've got the fans. It's just, again, it's the fans that are rubbing their final 2 brain cells that they have left. They're rubbing them together and saying, what kind of thought can I get out on Twitter right now? Oh, here's an easy one. Jake Diebler can't drop a winning play for Ohio State. Is it true in this scenario? Yeah, I guess. But I mean, can we go back to the West Virginia game for Ohio State? Can we go back to the Notre Dame game for Ohio State? Can we go back to what other game did they have recently where they needed a play drawn up and they won? Maybe that was it. I feel like I'm forgetting something else here, but regardless, Jake Diebler and the offensive staff have drawn up plays for Ohio State to win. So that's just a lazy take, but it is what it is. But once Ohio State missed that shot, I said, watching with my wife, whomst I love, and on the edge of my seat, and I said, we're going to lose. We're going to lose. We're going to lose. As if I'm on the team. I'm not, obviously. But I said, we're going to lose. We're going to lose. We're going to lose. That was my thought in the final 10 seconds. I mean, what happened in those final 10 seconds of regulation was insane, by the way. Let me get to that real quick. So the final sequence here for Ohio State. I love the Substack chat. It is so fun. So we have Ohio State. Let's see. John Mobley Jr. misses his jumper with 13 seconds left. Cade Tyson grabs the rebound with 10 seconds left. They drive all the way down the floor, and they miss a layup with 3 seconds left. Then they get the rebound, and then they miss a three-pointer again, and that's regulation. I think Bruce Thornton got the rebound, I want to say, and little loose ball, and we're done with the game, or done with the regulation period. All that to say, during that stretch, I said, I've seen this before. Ohio State's going to lose this. This is going to hurt. It's going to hurt really, really bad. So I had to start preparing myself. But instead, Ohio State, they get the stop. And then the final possession, I think, too, for Ohio State there with 25 seconds left, where Bruce Thornton's taking the free throws there at the end of regulation, or at the end of overtime. They take nearly all 30 seconds off the shot clock. Bruce Thornton, beautiful cut. He gets available and gets open on the open side of the floor. Grabs, I think, a bounce pass from John Mobley Jr., goes up with it. He gets fouled, makes his free throws, and the rest is history. That was it for Ohio State. And all in all, a win like this, you may be able to feel it already. I'm just kind of getting into this and giving my thoughts. It makes it really, really hard for me to piece together thoughts in a way that makes sense for the listener. I feel like I'm bouncing around at all times, basically, in games like these, where it's back and forth and you kind of get whiplashed and herky jerked into the end of a game where Ohio State somehow wins. And for me, my instant reaction once Ohio State won this game is just, it's excitement and it's hype. And I know that there's going to be detractors out there. There always will be detractors, but there's more detractors now than there's really ever been for Ohio State basketball, at least I guess in this like large scale social media era where everyone can talk about Ohio State and not really have all that smart of an opinion, but they can be loud and people will listen to them. Or maybe you don't even listen to them, but they say what they will regardless. This was a game that, again, it's a quad 3 win. It's at home. On the resume, it doesn't look that great, but there's something about a win where you're willing yourself to victory. You didn't really play well in this one, did Ohio State. You got out to some nice leads, but you lost them. And then you deal with foul trouble. You deal with John Mobley Jr. picking up 4 fouls. You deal with Christoph Tilley fouling out in this one. Ivan Nagovin, again, just foul trouble after foul trouble for him, playing limited minutes. Amare Bynum was nowhere to be found in this game. Just things didn't feel fully right for Ohio State. Didn't really feel like they deserved to have a clean green W at the end of this game, and yet they did. So I'm excited. I'm happy. And you know how I am on this show. You know, I try to be pretty slow to react, measured, analytical, things like that. But it's a good win for Ohio State nonetheless. So let's get into some key stats for Ohio State and Minnesota in this game. The first one I'll start with John Mobley Jr. He has now been Ohio State's best scorer over the past 2 games. He reached his career high against UCLA with 28 points. He was 6 of 12 from the 3-point line in that game. Absolutely crucial to Ohio State winning that game. Now he leads the way again for Ohio State with 26 points. In this one, he goes 9 of 19 from the field, 5 of 11 from deep. 9 of 19 from the field for a guard who's shooting most of his shots from behind the 3-point line is really, really good. He had no points in overtime. It didn't really matter, though, because Ohio State really cleaned up from there. A lot of that comes from Devin Royal to start the overtime period. As I was piecing together the final score graphic for this game, based on what Devin Royal did in that overtime period, I said, we got to put Devin on it, right? So I put Devin on it, but you could argue it should be Bruce Thornton. And you know what? You could also argue it should be Colin White. And had I seen a picture posted from Ohio State Hoops of Colin White, I would have actually put him on there. I saw it too late. So I went with Devin still. But Mobley was huge for Ohio State in this one. You look at the 3-pointer he made with 134 left in regulation. That was huge. He's been captain clutch for Ohio State this year. I know we've talked about Bruce Thornton, at least on this show, and his inefficiencies, his turnovers, his missed shots in clutch time for Ohio State over his career at Ohio State. That's really been the one issue we've had with Bruce Thornton at Ohio State. But I tell you what, John Mobley Jr., he takes this role on, and there's just something about him. When there's less than 2 minutes left to go, he can make shots, whether it be against North Carolina, whether it be against West Virginia, now against Minnesota. There's probably other games I'm forgetting as well. The shot that he made against UCLA going into the half, that was huge as well. John Mobley Jr. continues to be an excellent shot maker for Ohio State. And you got to wonder, where does Ohio State go if you start to really get consistent scoring out of John Mobley Jr.? Because he's been great for Ohio State. And we know the potential that he has. We know the top level ability that John Mobley Jr. has. The issue is you don't get it all the time. He had 3 points against Washington. He had 13 points in that win over Oregon, 22 against Nebraska, 12 against Rutgers, 20 against Grambling State, 13 against North Carolina. So coming into this game, he's averaging on a per game basis 14.6 points per game. We know that his ceiling is much better than that. So if John Mobley Jr. can really start to get things figured out here, I think, again, you've got to get him going early, because if you don't get him going early, I think mentally it's hard for him to stay locked in. It's kind of like Tom Brady said this, and I might have said this on the show before, but Tom Brady has said before that he tried to get all of his receivers at least a target, hopefully a touch, a reception on the first drive of the game, because at that point they can start to check out after that first drive, or they're just running routes and they're getting cardio in. I think it's similar for John Mobley Jr. He's got to get some shots up early and really get into the rhythm and flow of the game. And then from there, I think he can really settle in. And that's what we saw in this game. That's what we saw against UCLA, where he had one of the first buckets of the game. And as long as John Mobley Jr. is this good offensively, this Ohio State team is going to be tough to beat. I know they beat Minnesota by 8 points. It is what it is. But man, when they go play Michigan, if he can go off for 25, are you that worried about Ohio State being able to be in a game with 5 minutes left against Michigan, one of the best teams in the nation? If John Mobley Jr. has 25, because you're assuming at that point Bruce Thornton probably has 16. You're assuming Christoph Tilley probably has 9. Devin Royal probably has 12, something like that. If that's the case, Buckeyes are in it. But a lot of this starts with John Mobley Jr., because you know what you're going to get with Bruce Thornton. Do you know what you're going to get with John Mobley Jr. every night? I don't think so, but in this one, he was huge. Ohio State out-rebounded Minnesota 42-31 in this game. They are plus 11 on the glass against Minnesota, plus 10 on the glass against UCLA, plus 10 on the glass against Washington, and plus 9 on the glass against Oregon. That's all their last 4 games. Obviously, they go 3-1 in that stretch. Rebounding is absolutely huge. Numbers a little bit inflated tonight due to the 5 extra minutes that some players got. You look at Ivan Nagovin, he had 9. I get it. He committed 3 fouls in 16 minutes. This is something that I warned of during the offseason, coming into the season preview series. It's something that I mentioned all the time. And it was, look, Ivan Nagovin, I don't know how well he can defend without fouling this year. You can go back and look it up. I'm not saying that it's that hard of a prediction to make. It's not that bold, but it's something that we just saw coming, at least on this show, from Nagovin this year. And it was a concern that I had. But he commits 3 fouls in 16 minutes. He's 0-3 from the field. He scores 2 points, the final 2 points of the game. but the 9 rebounds were huge. And yeah, he had some balls poked away from him, and yeah, he struggles with just bringing the ball down to his chest and putting it at the eye level of everyone else because he's so tall. And he struggles sometimes with fundamentals. And I even tweeted in this game, he doesn't really look like a Big Ten player at this point. But the 9 rebounds from him were huge. It leads the way for Ohio State. You get some good with him, you get some bad with him. That's the case for pretty much any player coming off the bench for Ohio State so far this season. Bruce Thornton continues his best prime Russell Westbrook impression, 7 rebounds in this one. He finishes with 23 points, 3 assists as well. He was poor from deep in this one, only made 1 3-pointer, but he clutched it up for Ohio State. 2 big shots in overtime to really give Ohio State distance. There were a couple periods. It was the Devin Royal 2 shots that he made to start overtime and really put Minnesota's back against the wall. And then you had Colin White, and then you had Bruce Thornton giving Ohio State distance. Bruce Thornton was huge. And also in the end of regulation, 54 seconds left in regulation, he makes a shot, and he makes his free throw as well after getting fouled to give Ohio State the lead back. Bruce Thornton was huge in this game. Amare Bynum, Devin Royal both had 5 rebounds as well in this one. Devin Royal was really, really good. Again, Devin Royal, I mean, these guys are college basketball players. They're not perfect. They're not NBA players. You're going to deal with some bad moments. That's the case with Devin Royal, but he did have 16 points in this one, 6 of 14 from the field. He's 1 of 5 from the 3-point line. That's not good, obviously. He's been a better 3-point shooter than that overall so far this season. Not great from the free throw line either, but a pretty complete game, and he plays 41 minutes. John Mobley Jr. played 43 minutes. Bruce Thornton played 42 minutes. These guys are playing their tails off every single night because of the lack of depth Ohio State has. So, yeah, they're going to leave some shots short in the second half because they're tired. That's just how it goes, and that's never going to get fixed. Puff Johnson returning to Ohio State or playing for Ohio State, that's not going to fix the depth problem overnight that Ohio State has. So, guys are going to leave shots short in the second half. That is what it is at this point. But the rebounding battle for Ohio State won again for the Buckeyes. In this one, it was huge. Ohio State ended up winning this game. Buckeyes, again, second straight game where they really do a great job preventing paint scoring. They only allowed 26 paint points in this game after suffocating UCLA for just 16 paint points. That's 5 points less than the worst paint scoring team averages in all of college basketball this season. The paint defense continues to improve, I think likely in part thanks to the 2-3 zone that Ohio State has been playing. Look, they're going to give up open shots, especially on the backside. The backside cutter to the basket. When Ohio State's too slow to rotate, Devin Royal did cut that off late in the game, and he made a stop there where Minnesota went to that a couple times, and they were able to get buckets. You got to rotate faster. You've got to be better. I get all of that into 2-3 zone. When it comes to the 2-3 zone, my question, well, I'll get into it later, but I mean, I think we all have this confirmation bias at this point on Ohio State zoning versus playing man defensively. There's reasons why they're zoning, and they're normal. It's the same as what Matt Sylvester said when he joined the show. But all that said, Minnesota only shot 40% from the field in this game. They only scored 26 paint points. When you don't allow easy buckets and when the opposing team only has 8 3-pointers made, it's really hard to win a game. They score 74 points in this game. 20 of those points come from free throws. If it wasn't for free throws, Ohio State would have dominated Minnesota in this game. But overall, the paint defense looked really good for Ohio State. And that's without Christoph Tilley for a long time and without Amare Bynum for a long time, your 2 starting players in the front court. Clutch time for Ohio State. Buckeyes were really special in this one. On their last 5 field goal attempts, Ohio State made 4 of them. All but one of those were jump shots, by the way. In the final 4 minutes from the final 4 minutes of the second half to the end of the game, they make 9 of their 15 field goal attempts. They go 5 of 7 from the field in overtime. This is an Ohio State team that we'll talk about here in a second. Their struggles in close games, their struggles in tight games, their struggles in clutch time. We've talked about it before, but in this one, they played their absolute best basketball late. And what did Jake Diebler say when he joined the show in the summer guest series? What did Joel Justice say? And Q Banks, head of strength and conditioning there for Ohio State basketball. All of them came on the show and said, hey, we have got to play our best basketball late. That was an issue for us last year. It's going to be a focal point for us this year. And in this game, Ohio State, they played their best basketball late. Takeaways in this one. for Ohio State against Minnesota. The Buckeyes win this game 82-74. My first question is, where on earth was Amare Bynum in this game? I could go back and look. I don't have an answer right now. I'd have to go rewatch the game. Amare Bynum was nowhere to be found for most of the we're in, as Matt Sylvester would say, nut cutting time for Ohio State. He didn't play for the entirety of the 7:35 mark in the second half to the 1:17 mark in the second half. He then plays the final 1 minute and 17 seconds of the second half, and he doesn't get a single second of playing time in the overtime period. In total, your starting power forward had 22 minutes. He was charged with only 2 fouls. So this wasn't a foul issue for Amare Bynum not playing. And it's really weird. It's really curious too, because it's not like Amare Bynum was in a Brandon Knoll situation. Brandon Knoll, before he suffered that foot injury, he would just get benched. He would not play the entire second half, or he played a couple minutes. I don't remember which game it was. I won't find it now, but he played very sparingly in the second half of game. And I texted someone and said, just what's going on? And essentially it was actually, I think, while Brandon Knoll was still a starter. And they essentially said, yeah, like the trust it's starting to drop for Brandon Knoll. And Amare Bynum, the trust for him is skyrocketing. So Bynum's going to get the minutes. And in this one, he got nothing. You have no Brandon Knoll. So it's not like there was a lot of depth there at power forward. I don't know if there's an injury going on that we don't know about. I've said before, Ohio State's not healthy. There are players who are not on the injury report or the availability report that's released before the game that are dealing with things. And that's as specific as I'll be. But this is not a healthy team right now. And I don't know if Amare Bynum is a part of that or not. I'm going to try to find an answer on that, and I'll share it when the time comes. But he was nowhere to be found. He's 0 of 1 from the field, by the way, with 0 points. So it's just odd. It was really, really odd to see Ohio State win this game. That's why, again, I say it was a great win, because so many things went wrong for the Buckeyes in this one, including where on earth was Amare Bynum in this game. So my first takeaway is a question: where was Amare Bynum in this game? Second takeaway: I selfishly root for Colin White. I selfishly, and with much bias within my heart and with no shame, root very, very hard for Colin White. Colin White was the first player to ever join the Views from the Schott podcast. He was the first person as a part of the Ohio State basketball program as a whole to join the Views from the Schott podcast, and he did it when he committed to Ohio State. He wasn't even a member of the team yet. He joined the show basically to share his story, talk about why he's committing to Ohio State and all that. And it was a great, I was really, really impressed with Colin White, especially as a high schooler at that time, joining the show and sharing his story and things like that. So I really, really selfishly root for Colin White. I love him. In the time that I get to talk with him, not only is he kind and just a good guy, he's smart, he's mature. Like, I just like him. I like him a lot. And that's me being selfish. And that's me being unable to hold back my favoritism on a podcast. Sorry. It's who I am at this point. I really, really root for Colin White. Here's the thing: I don't think Ohio State wins this game without Colin White. And you can look up and down the box score, and you can look at John Mobley Jr., you can look at Bruce Thornton, you can look at Devin Royal. But the most pivotal moment of this 45-minute game came when Colin White was able to grab a loose ball that I think was poked out by Ivan Nagovin, by the way. He grabs the steal, and then he sprints to the other side of the floor like a gazelle, cheetah, something fast, and finishes a layup. He's white and he's blonde. So everyone and their brother is going to say, well, he's not that good of an athlete. Wrong. Colin White has the explosion that some other basketball players would love to have, quite frankly. Colin White's got speed, he's got explosion, he's got liftoff, he's got all those different types of things, and you saw it when he had that steal. And when he got that steal, Ohio State was up by 3 points. Had it not been for Colin White and his awareness on that play, maybe Minnesota keeps the ball, maybe they score a 3, and maybe we're tied up at that point. And then maybe the Buckeyes go down on the next possession because it's not in transition. It's not off a miss. Minnesota gets a chance to get back on defense, and they get to slow you down with that 2-3 zone and make you feel uncomfortable, and they get a stop. And then Minnesota goes down because they get a stop. They get to run down the floor. Ohio State's defense isn't set, and they get a score, and they're up by 2. And then maybe Minnesota wins the game from there. That is the difference we could have seen in this game had it not been for Colin White doing what he did. He had 2 rebounds in this game. He got credited for 1 assist, but he had passes to both John Mobley Jr. and Bruce Thornton that led to makes, both of which seemed assist worthy. The final stats, the official stats from this game, I'll refresh just to make sure because sometimes they get changed over time. He was credited with 1 assist. Colin White still credited with 1 assist in this game. But he showed vision that he continues to show sparks and streaks of. The rebounds that he has. Look, I get it. Everyone has their moments. I've talked about that on this episode plenty of times. Every player is going to have their moments. But Colin White's ability in this game to come up in the absolute most clutch moment for the Buckeyes as a guy who has played not a lot of time this year. He's played very sparingly. He's not been aggressive. He's not gotten a lot of shots up. When he goes in, he's basically a guy who you trust to go play defense, to go rebound, and to go help. And instead of helping, in this one, Colin White won the game for the Buckeyes. I don't think Ohio State wins without Colin White. Does Ohio State win without John Mobley Jr.? Do they win without Bruce Thornton? No, obviously not. But without that play from Colin White, things could have been a lot different. So I think he deserves a lot of attention. He deserves a lot of love. There's a lot of fans who are celebrating Colin White for what he did in that overtime period. And even in the end of regulation, he got a lot of minutes in this game. He got a lot of run. He got 19 minutes in this one. A lot of people talking really, really highly of him who need to go back and delete some tweets about Colin White. The Ohio State zone is something that we talk about constantly. It's something that fans want to talk about constantly. Look, Nico Medved, Minnesota's head coach, at the end of this game, he said he probably didn't do a good enough job preparing for Ohio State's zone. How about that? Look, we as onlookers, as casual observers, as fans, whatever you want to call yourself, we like to think we know what's going on. We like to think we know what's going on the floor. And sometimes we maybe don't have as good of an idea as we think. I think when you look at the 2-3 zone, and I get it. I get the negatives behind the zone. I also get why they do it. It slows the other team down. It protects you from fouls. When you have no depth, it keeps your stamina up because you're taking less steps. I've talked about that all. Even on the last show, I talked about that. When you have an opposing coach come in and say, you know what? That zone beat us. We weren't ready for the 2-3 zone. They did much better in that zone than we're prepared for. I don't know. He also said he felt the Gophers did a better job being aggressive in the second half when they shot 50%. That's great. And the entirety of the game, they shot 40%, as I said, from the field. That 2-3 zone, I'll say this again. Check the points per possession on the 2-3 zone for Ohio State compared to man-to-man. Is anyone going to do that? No. Does anyone have a database or a resource to be able to see that? No, we don't. But you know who does? Ohio State internally. And I'm just going to say, you may not like the answer there, but there's one method of defense here that might be a little bit better than the other, and you'd be surprised which it is. The 2-3 zone, something Minnesota was not prepared for in this one. Got to give Jake Diebler, and you got to give Jamal Walker, defense coordinator, credit as well. Last note on this game is on Jake Diebler. Jake Diebler is showing signs of improvement as a head coach for the Ohio State University Buckeyes. There's a lot of heat on him. There's a lot of fans that are not happy that Jake Diebler is the head coach of their favorite basketball team, and I completely understand that. I get it from day one why fans wouldn't be happy with it, but what you have to understand is the argument that I've made all along, and it's this. If you think back to year 0 in whatever job you had out of college or out of high school, whatever the case may be, and you look at how you did from year 0 to 1 and year 1 to 2, how much improvement you had in those 2 years, you would say, you know what? I was way more prepared for these issues. I was much better at my job. I was much more effective and exponentially in year 2 than I was in year 1. And I think the same can be true for someone who has their first ever role as head coach in Division I basketball. For Jake Diebler at this point, we are now seeing growth in these close games. This was a game with 18 lead changes. This was a game with 11 ties and you won. People will say Minnesota sucks. It shouldn't have been that close. Guess what? Ohio State covered the spread at the end of the game. Last year, in tight games, I would define 8 points or less, because some of those games, the margin could be 3. It gets ballooned because of fouls, whatever the case may be. In games decided by 8 points or less, Ohio State only won 5 of 16 games. They were 5-11. This year, in that very same metric, they've won 5 games already, but they've only lost 5. They're 5-5. Is that great? No, but it's marketed improvement from last season. At least the pace is right now. In games decided by 1 possession or less, which I would consider 4 points just for this argument, Ohio State is 3-3. That is better than where they were last year. It's not great, but it's far better than a 5-11 pace. So if you're mad about Jake Diebler, that's fine. But the facts don't have emotions. The facts don't get angry. The facts are the facts. And the facts right now is that Jake Diebler in year 2 as head coach for Ohio State is showing improvement in close games, in tight games, in crunch time, in clutch time. It seems like he might be doing a better job of managing late game scenarios now than he did this time last year. We'll see where things go from here, but it's an encouraging sign for Ohio State. So the Buckeyes win this one. They improved to 13-5 and 5-3 in Big Ten play. And again, you'll look back at the past couple years, whether it be Diebler or Holtman, during the downfall of Chris Holtman into Jake Diebler, Ohio State has not been in this opportunistic spot on January 21st. They haven't. They have been playing from behind. They've been playing catch up, then playing on the wrong side of the bubble. Right now, with this win, is Ohio State now in the NCAA tournament. I tweeted out yesterday, Bracket Matrix, they have Ohio State as one of the last 4 teams in the top. Basically the best of the last 4 in. So playing in day in, but the easiest to get in the NCAA tournament of any of the last 4 teams. Is that where they're going to be at the end of the year? Does that project to where they're going to be at the end of the year? Obviously not, but it shows you that they're at least not on the outside looking in right now, and I still would tend to agree with that. What I see right now from Ohio State is a team that's 13-5, 5-3 in the Big Ten, 0 quad 3, quad 4 losses, and opportunities to go win in quad 1 and quad 2. That next opportunity is going to be against Michigan. It's going to be a tough game. It's going to be a battle. Ohio State is not going to be favored. Michigan is going to be favored by a lot of points. We will talk about that game coming up. But again, as a reminder, if you're not subscribed on the Substack, highly recommend you get there. I'm going to post an article tomorrow about Puff Johnson. I'm going to give the facts on that because I'm tired of seeing people acting like they know what's going on and they have no clue what's going on with Puff Johnson. They're just saying things because it's Twitter and they feel like they can. And that bothers me. So let's get the truth out there. All right. So appreciate you listening today. Good win for Ohio State. Big win for Ohio State. Congrats to you if you stayed up and watched the whole thing. And not that it was that late, but it was a longer game. So the Buckeyes win. They move on. They pass a test. They won a game they couldn't afford to lose. So good on Ohio State and good on you for watching that game if you did. Until next time, I appreciate you listening to today's show. As always, I shut up before you shut me off. Go Bucks.